Good evening. How are we both?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Firstly, thank you very much for both of you for your time, for joining me this evening. I'm really glad to have a chat to you both about performance analysis and like coding and all that kind of good stuff, which some coaches I think use pretty well and others maybe need to do a little bit better. But first off, who are you and what do you do?
So
Amber, you can go first.
I was going anyway. My name's Amber. I'm the performance analyst for Great Britain and England hockey. And I also am a technical lead for the English Institute of Sport as well, which I do 1 day a week.
Mm-hmm. And Emma?
My name is Emma. I am performance analyst with England and Great Britain hockey and also Great Britain climbing, of which I do part-time, both roles.
So, I mean, they're pretty cool jobs. I'm not going to lie. Like, being involved with sport every day, traveling the world, doing some pretty cool stuff, like, that sounds like an absolute dream job. So, like, how did you both get into it? So, like, Amber, how did you get into analysis and how long have you kind of been involved with GB hockey?
Yeah, so I initially started out studying sports science, and I didn't really, at that point, have an awareness that I wanted to be an analyst. I think, don't be fooled by the baby face. I probably was at uni quite a while ago when it wasn't quite something that was so apparent like it is now. There weren't really many courses specifically in performance analysis like there are now. So all I knew at that point was that I wanted to work in elite sport. Actually, in football is kind of where I grew up, and that was my sport growing up. So that's where I wanted to be. So I did an internship as a sports scientist for a football club, and that kind of entailed a few different things. So a bit of strength and conditioning, a bit of analysis, a bit of nutrition, kind of dipped a toe in every area. And that's really where I thought actually analysis is something that seemed of real interest. And at uni, I specialised in biomechanics, so kind of the numbers and the maths around that kind of lend itself quite nicely.
Yeah.
So from uni, I then stepped into having now an awareness that I wanted to try and be an analyst. I went to work for a football club as an analyst. I started off at Reading as an intern, and then subsequently then managed to get a job with them, working in their first team. So I was there for 2 seasons, and then found myself falling into hockey, which I've now been in for about 5.5 years.
So that's a pretty cool journey, and biomechanics was my love at uni as well, so I can definitely see out the transition from biomechanics into the analysis stuff. Em, how did you get into it?
Similar to Amber, really. I did sports science at uni. My background was in swimming. I was a swimmer for many years and kind of knew that I wanted to work in sport. Whether it be swimming, whatever sort of NPB, that kind of route took me. I then went straight out of uni, went to work for England hockey in the talent development department and really enjoyed it. Then started volunteering because I didn't want my Saturdays with Reading, the local Premier League team, and was kind of taught how to loosely do video analysis, bit of coding. And was there for a year, and then I decided with my job, I kind of got to a crossroads and thought I want a bit more challenge. I knew Amber through The Office and our love of tea, and she said, "We've got a nice little studentship, and would that, so I applied, was successful, and that sort of took me down this journey, and now I'm 3 years with hockey, and then a year ago got the role with climbing, so kind of dovetailed with my part-time role within hockey. So I'm a little bit more youthful in my analysis journey compared to Amber.
Steady.
Yeah, still loving it.
So I'm going to ask a fairly obvious question. And I'm kind of keen to hear both of your answers. Like, what is performance analysis? Because that is quite a broad topic, and I guess some people have an idea of what it is, but like, what is it?
Okay, so it's essentially making observations that enhance performance and improve decision making through the use of data analysis, so objective stats, and visual feedback using video. So it's a combination of the two, and some might lie more heavily in the video analysis section, depending on your athletes and your coach. Some might be a bit more data driven, but there usually is a combination of the two in some aspect.
So,
probably an example of that, where with hockey it might be, particularly with my two roles, with hockey it might lie a little bit more in the kind of video side at times, but then something like climbing, I probably do a lot significantly less video work than probably the more objective statistical data side, crunching numbers. So that's probably a bit of an example.
And so this kind of leads me on to my next bit. What would you say like the main differences are between kind of working in PA in individual sports versus kind of team sports? And I guess that kind of falls to Emma first, and Amber, I'd like to kind of hear the differences between maybe football and hockey after. So, what would you say the main differences are?
For me, mine's been between my two sports have been a lot about obviously you're focusing on team performance, so getting sort of individuals to learn or improving their sport is one thing, but actually trying to get a group of individuals to develop can often entail different things. So I suppose a team focus, and particularly within my role with the elite development squads, there is that individual focus of improving my skills individually as a player, but also collective learning. So I guess it's things that kind of improve performance in that sense. But they will look really different for different sports. So my role in climbing is although it's an individual sport, other individual sports like combat sports the provision might look really different. So it is quite sport specific.
Okay. And then Amber, what would you say kind of differences are between kind of provision for football and the provision for hockey?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the reason I ended up falling into hockey was because of the fact that there was a lot of transferable skills between football and hockey, and kind of the structures of the sports are similar. I think the main thing is probably from there's quite a cultural difference in how analysis is used in football than it is in hockey. Quite often analysts actually in football will pull together quite a lot of the briefings, and those clips that then the management style will look at it and change and add some bits in before they then play to the athletes. Whereas in hockey, the coaches take quite a lot of ownership of that kind of let's find some subjective clips. And I guess really it's more, I say resourcing in the sense that there often are more analysts for one team, but that isn't to say that the workload is like I didn't work less in football because there was more of us. It's just it was a different thing, and we had different areas that we focused on. So I think you get, I guess, a little bit different in your workflows because there's you, so you are quite targeted to. I only have resource and capacity to do this one thing or these couple of things very well. So they're probably where the differences lie. But like I said, I think I still worked exactly the same kind of workload. They just look different because of the resources you have available to you. Football and rugby get external companies that can give them some data. So potentially their longitudinal data sets might look different to the types of things we can do in hockey because the only data we get in hockey is what we can collect ourselves, which maybe might be limited. But as I said, the more data you have, the more questions you have, and the more things you can answer. So there's not really one or the other that kind of is a easier ride as such. They're just slightly different.
And again, I guess that side of things means that some people might think a performance analyst is they stand on a tower with a camera, film, press finish, job done, see you later, I'll have a cup of tea. But that's far from the case. So what kind of things, and obviously can't go into too much detail, but what kind of things do you think, what kind of things are you really kind of doing when you're not stood up in the tower in the delightful British weather?
That bit's the easy bit for sure. Yeah, so I think where we've tried to get to is optimizing what our live training and match coding looks like. Like I said, more from a resource point of view. We've taken I've certainly taken quite a big journey in hockey. When I started, I probably didn't code that much live in training or in matches, but I'd spent quite a long time afterwards going back through different clips and labeling it and giving it more context, which would then be the foundation of what our reports and information to the coaches would be. But after realizing kind of different workflows, and as you move along your journey, you speak to different people, you pick up different tips. So the bulk of it now actually is done live. So that means that the kind of the processing power is done, and therefore I have a little bit more time to actually digest the information, find some trends, and actually pull out the information for coaches that are really directed towards what we're looking for. So it's amazing. You often think when you're not at training or they're not playing a match, what are you doing? But we have a whole host of the opposition that we need to keep a track on. We need to get footage of them. We need to code it. We need to update that database. We're constantly developing and changing and adjusting what our reports look like to optimize what it's being delivered and how the coaches are using it, and how we translate that into performance on the pitch. So there's an awful lot of background kind of workflow development and information digesting that usually you don't get a busting lot of time to do. So trying to get as much done live to maximize the opportunity of looking at trends to find some answers is probably where we sit now.
Yeah. And then Em, I guess on your side of things with climbing versus hockey, I guess on the climbing side, you're not going to be really going to all the competitions and stuff. So your stuff, I guess, is then purely based away from there. So kind of home based. So what does that kind of workflow look like compared to then hockey?
Climbing's been really interesting because it's a new sport for Tokyo. So they had a couple of years, and it's a new discipline for climbing. So sport climbing is based of 3 disciplines: speed, lead, and boulder. And traditionally, you compete in one, and sometimes athletes will compete in lead and boulder together. Speed is slightly different. You've probably seen the kind of Spider-Man videos of people racing at walls. So there's the kind of 2 and then 1 set aside. But traditionally there will be just single disciplines, so all the World Championships are single discipline. But for Tokyo, to get it into the Olympics, the federation agreed to have a combined event, which you would compete in all 3, and then your ranking would be multiplied, and whoever had the lowest ranking would win. So it's been about kind of exploring what that means for the athletes, and how to win. And then kind of, so breaking it down from a new event point of view, none of the climbers in the world will have competed in all 3 disciplines for a long period of time, certainly not to win a major championships. So it's just been about trying to learn and answer as many kind of performance questions from the coaches as possible on that kind of journey. So initially, it was before any athletes had qualified, so you had that kind of qualification process.
Nice relaxing time when there's no athletes qualified yet.
Yeah, it was really great. Trying to work out kind of so the criteria. There were various qualifying events, a lot of it based on rankings. So kind of how many points did you have? What did that mean for your performance? Loads. How many events could you compete in? But also kind of balancing. Are you going to get injured? All those kinds of things. A lot of just trying to learn about a new sport, trying to get as much data as we can, because we were starting from absolute zero, nice blank piece of paper.
Because you were one of, if not the first analyst in climbing?
Yeah, I don't know, because I haven't spoken to anyone who works for any other nation, but from what coaches say, I think we're probably looking at stuff that maybe other people aren't looking at, don't know. But anything that can kind of give us a bit of a performance edge, hopefully will be beneficial. So yeah, that's quite exciting.
That's cool. So my next question really, so you guys have collected all this data, you've either been to the tournaments or you've got the data from tournaments or whatever. You've got these huge data sets and all these video and everything else. How do you then present that back to coaches? Because coaches and analysts are two very different things. So how do you present that data, and what kind of processes would you kind of recommend for maybe somebody starting out in analysis or whatever? So yeah, how do you present back to the coaches?
So I guess there's multiple different ways you can present stuff back, and often it does dictate what kind of software you've got, because some platforms offer different options to others. But I guess if we're just looking at really what that analyst-coach relationship, or kind of actually delivering a message, it has to be a two-way process, often driven by a coach but influenced by an analyst. Because at the end of the day, whatever we're delivering needs to be digestible and hit home to a coach, so they can use it to inform their decisions and change training, or maybe a structure of how we're going to go against an opposition. So I think it's often quite easy for us to sit in our bubble and say, oh, this is what we think it should look like. But we really need to have that dialogue with the coaches and understand what they would want. And sometimes, like all of us, we don't know what we don't know. So sometimes we might produce something and say, what do you think of this? It may land, it may not. But that constant feedback and dialogue eventually gets you to a position where you have a workflow and an output that does the trick and does what is necessary. So we have a couple of options. We've often sat, as most people do, with just here's a PDF report of statistics, and it might benchmark that match against what our normal averages are to give us a little bit of an idea as to how we have done in that game. Because we use sports code, we can have output reports that actually allow us to link the statistics to the videos. That adds another bit of context, which is useful. And then there's other different types of visualization tools like Tableau or Power BI, which actually can allow things to be slightly more dynamic than what a flat report would look like in a PDF format. But it really depends where, I guess, the coaches are in their analysis journey as well.
I was going to say, so there's got to be a bit of an education both ways, because obviously like you say, you don't know what you don't know as an analyst, but as a coach, I don't know a lot. I know a reasonable amount, but I don't know anywhere near what you two would know. So how do you then upskill educating the coach, and how's that journey been?
Yeah, I think for me, what often, I guess what I've certainly learned early on in my career, thinking that more is better, and actually I'm just going to give you everything I can do because I want to show you that I'm a good analyst. So here's everything. And we all go through that, and even now I probably still do that, because obviously you want to have the most impact as you can. But quite often the simple things done well are the most effective. And sometimes having something really stripped back and just highlighting those key themes of what we were looking to do in that game, and giving them a good reference and a benchmark as to actually, have we made improvements in that or have we not, sometimes can lead to the most informative conversations.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah, so I certainly, I guess, to start with, would first of all try and understand exactly what you're trying to achieve with it. Like, what do you want that to be saying? And if it is just a load of numbers, where do you think what do you think the coach is picking out from that? It has to tell a story, and it has to, the bits that they want to see, or the most important things, need to pop. They need to be obvious. So yeah, first of all, find out what you actually are trying to achieve. Like, what's the purpose of it, which sometimes can get a bit lost because you just throw everything in. And I think once you get to a point where you know what you're trying to achieve, you can then start asking questions of yourself on how the best way is to visualize that. And do I just need a number, or do I need to link that with video? and how to go about those things. So definitely having a clear purpose will allow you to achieve something far greater than kind of just everything in the melting pot and see what it looks like.
And then, so obviously then that's good if you've got kind of historical background. You can be like, okay, well, we've maybe done these things before, but let's try and look at these. And as you're with climbing and there's nothing before, what's that relationship like between you and kind of coaching staff and performance directors and things like that? And how is that then different?
Yeah, it was an interesting time. Pretty much sort of doing a project and not knowing kind of what we wanted to achieve, but not knowing really the kind of preferences of, you know, visual, like learning preferences, how the coaches or any other staff had preferred to receive things. I think building off what Amber said, knowing how to kind of land that message of delivering analysis in the way that people are kind of comfortable with, sort of comes down to your building your relationships with those people and trying to understand where they're coming from, and what they've learned and what you can teach them, or how you can upskill them, or if they even need upskilling. I was quite lucky in that the coach that I primarily work with absolutely loves data. So actually, after a bit of time, trying to trust myself in kind of what I was delivering, but also really trying to quite quickly see what his kind of preferences were. That was the way I approached it. It's never particularly easy with a new coach or staff or players, or, you know, a new sport, because you just don't know what you don't know. You can, for me, I just kind of base it off principles that we've been working on, and obviously, you know, too much can overwhelm people, and you kind of start with little bits that you know they've talked about, you know, key stats that they might have mentioned in conversation, and you can pick up on things that might hook them in a little bit to try and help you tell that story. But yeah, it's a learning process for sure, and I think probably Amber would agree, however many years in you would still be learning how to tailor your analysis or your reports or your approach to your coaches and your players or athletes.
I think the common theme that kind of came across both you then, it's one, I like the telling the story. I think that's a really nice way to put it, and actually something which I've not heard before. And actually it makes complete sense. You are telling a story, and if you tell it in the wrong way, the coach isn't going to get what you're trying to get across. So I really like that, and I think that's a good little takeaway. And the other thing is that the relationship is really important. So if you haven't got that relationship, you can't help or influence as much as maybe you would like, and they then probably can't get the best out of you. How important then is that kind of trust element and being fully integrated into the side? Like, that must be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is in any role, in any team, really, if you're going to have maximum impact, and you work so closely with people, that you need to kind of have that common goal and that sort of element of being able to talk to each other and be open and honest about things. I don't know whether this is just my perception of coaches or whether it's true, but I often think sometimes when I look back at some of the work I did a few years ago, and I wonder how much a coach knew how much effort I'd put into something and didn't quite want to say, do you know what, I don't use that page. Like, I don't use that, because you know, people, obviously we create good relationships with people, but actually, you know, being able to just say, does this land for you? If it doesn't, absolutely tell me, because my number one goal is to get to a point where this is as effective as possible. I don't think I will ever get to a point, and I haven't yet, of being an analyst for nearly 8 years. I've never got to a point where I've gone, that's the finished article. That's it, done. I'm not going to be. I have been tweaking and recreating and rebuilding, because things move on, people change, new skills come in, and you're never going to have the finished version. And as long as you're prepared to have an open and honest conversation with a coach and be aware that you know what, some things won't land, and you will be told that idea I don't like. And that is fine. That is actually okay. It might feel uncomfortable the first couple of times it happens, but it happens to everyone. It doesn't mean that that necessarily was a bad idea. It might just mean that for that coach in particular, that doesn't work. So everybody learns differently, everybody views things differently, and a bar graph for one coach might absolutely work, but for another, it might not land. And it's actually saying the same message. The data is the same. It's just how we're displaying it, and understanding how well a certain type of visual works for one coach and for how it works for another allows you to really tailor what your reports are saying to optimize the person that's reading it.
Yeah. So you guys are obviously working at the very top end. You're kind of on the cutting edge. Amber, you may have won some little tournament, been at some major games and got a gold medal. We don't like to talk about it, but may have won an Olympic gold medal. We have a star in our midst.
Oh, it certainly wasn't me.
What advice would you give to somebody who's thinking, actually, you know what, this looks really interesting, and I'd like to get stuck into this, or maybe somebody who's just started doing a bit of analysis at club level in rugby, football, hockey, whatever, and they're kind of wanting to do more. What would your advice be?
I think just try and get as much sort of experience as possible in terms of different experience. A lot of analysts have all gone through a similar journey. We've had to do an internship. We've had to try and someone at some point has said, you know what, I'm going to take a risk on you, like Danny Carey did with me. I came from football. I knew nothing about hockey, and someone took a risk. And I think if you can get as much experience as possible in different areas, one, you pick up ideas, because there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. And you pick up different ideas, and the more you learn from different people, the more you understand that there are different ways of doing things that are maybe more effective than what you've currently got in your locker. And also it will teach you a little bit about whether you really want to do it, because there are some incredible highs of being an analyst and working in elite sport, but as with every job, there's cons to it as well. Em will vouch for this. When we go away on tournaments and we're up the tower, for example, we take Rio, for example. It was the most incredible experience. And yes, we won a gold medal, and that will be forever one of the biggest memories of my career or my personal life. But I spent that entire time with the opposition analysts more than I did my own team, because that's the reality of the role we play. And more often than not, again, Em will see this as well. We're stuck up a tower when people are celebrating on the pitch, and we're just trying to get down from the scaffold. And you are kind of, albeit you are involved in the team, but you play quite a different role. And I don't think for the month I was at Rio, I had more than 4 hours sleep a night. And it was, absolutely worth it. Don't get me wrong, but there are obviously, with everything, pros and cons to it. But yeah.
And what would your one piece of advice be?
I probably learned this one from Amber, to be fair. But I think if I could tell myself this, I mean, even yesterday, or 3 years ago, making mistakes is, without a doubt, the best way that you're going to learn, and it's okay. Stuff will break, and it will rain. And when it doesn't rain, your laptop will crash, or whatever happens. But the more that happens, annoyingly, because it will keep happening, and the more that you slightly get things wrong or miss the boat or whatever, the more you will learn, and the better you will become because of it. And I think, as horrible as it is to be comfortable with those things, being comfortable with it, that is okay, and that will make you better. I still have to tell myself it's okay to make mistakes, because it's just so long as you learn from them. But that will make you, if you want to become an analyst, much better.
So, after the advice then, what would you say then? We'll start with Amber. What is your your highlight moment from your analysis career? What's your fondest memory?
An obvious one is when the women won gold at Rio. But because that's so obvious, one experience that really really made me feel valued and made me love my job and the people I work with was the Europeans 2017. Like I alluded to, sometimes we don't make it down to the pitch for that big last huddle and celebration. And this happened to be where the players and staff walked up the steps to get their medals. It was a little bit Champions League like, which doesn't happen often. And it was in Holland, and the crowd was so busy, and I couldn't get through. And I'm thinking, selfishly, I'm like, I'm missing kind of that moment that we've worked hard for. And our team captain basically got off the stadium, looked around, and ran back up the stairs to ask for another medal. And the broadcast cameras are following her because media want requests and things. And even the commentators are like, what's she doing? And essentially she realised that I wasn't there, and she made sure that she went and got a medal. And as soon as I finally managed to get to the pitch, she put it around my neck, and all the girls gave me a hug. And that for me is probably is as equal to winning gold from a real kind of like personal, emotional sense, in that, you realise that you sometimes feel quite distant and in the background, but they definitely realise the impact that you have, and the help you've given to them and everybody to get to win a medal.
What's yours?
I think I've got two because I'm indecisive and I can't choose.
Shock.
One is really similar to Amber's. It was the second year that I'd worked with the Elite Development Programme men, and we were in Johor, which was the second time I've been in Johor. First time was probably what felt like a week into my studentship, knowing nothing at that point. But we had, the first year that I was with them, we'd come second. We'd won every game in the tournament, but come second. Obviously, we lost the last game. You can edit that bit out. And the second year we won in what feels like a really close final, as they all probably do. And obviously I was still filming at the time that they'd won straight after the game, and because there's not really any TV footage for my squads, I was kind of zooming in to try and get everyone's celebration. And I hadn't realised, but they as I started to film the staff, all of the players started to run up to the tower, the pitch in front of the tower, and just clap me, which was really nice because it was the start of my role as an EIS, what's the word? Employee, and kind of the end of my studentship. So it was actually really nice, having had a bit of time off and then came back. And then probably my second highlight was last summer at the European Junior Championships, for the under-21s, where I was with the men again, with England men, and we had a difficult group. They were always really close, and we'd had quite a difficult summer and quite a hard lead into the tournament. Results hadn't really gone our way, so it was a bit kind of nervy going into it, and there's qualification for Junior World Cup on the line, so quite tense, and just the whole kind of week of the tournament, kind of a win rolled into another win and a draw at the right time, and then suddenly we'd made it into the semi-finals, and quite a lot of the boys had experienced it 2 years before, going into the playoff places, based on goal difference and not sort of win-loss. And their semi-final then, when we managed to make the final for the first time in 21 years, most of the players weren't even born, and just that was an unbelievable experience for me. Those are my highs, I think.
So you got 30 seconds each. Low point, really short, snappy story. 30 seconds. What's your low light of your career?
There are definitely hundreds of them. I think one of the biggest panics I had was my camera took a big tumble 2 days before the opening game of the Olympics. So that was a little bit of a panic kind of situation, but it got rectified. And 2 days later, on the opening game, the tower we were supposed to film from failed its safety check. and therefore we weren't actually allowed on the tower, but the games were about to start, and clearly it's the Olympics, so you climb a tower.
Yeah. Em?
For me, I was lucky enough to go out to Aslan Shah with the senior men in 2018. It sort of happened during my studentship, and I thought, yeah, this is going to be really exciting. I'm going to, be there for a senior match. It's quite a big deal, and I was not very well, and subsequently missed half the tournament, which to be in bed, so I couldn't even do the job that I was there to do. And the added bonus of it being for a senior team was a bit of a low, I think, for me.
We're going to finish there, guys. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure. Stay safe, look after yourselves, and look forward to seeing you both really soon.
Thank you.
Bye.